Thank you for tuning into our podcast. We are coming to you from South Hadley, Massachusetts. I am your host, Carrie, and joining me is Holyoke's very own local historian and creator of the historical tours of Greater Holyoke, Robert Kuhn. And he offers both public and private tours, as well as presentations of the local canal systems, reservoirs, cemeteries, and churches, as well as various parks and streets in Holyoke, South Hadley, and Chicopee, Mass. Now you actually lead these tours and give these presentations yourself, is that correct?
Yeah, that's right, and this one's having its anniversary next year.
Okay, so today he'll be educating us on the Rodphey Sholom Cemetery. Now, what is the history of the Rodphey Sholom Cemetery?
It is the cemetery for the Rodphey Sholom Synagogue in Holyoke. It was found in Chicopee because of lower property values. They could buy the land at lower cost. And what's happened is it developed into a nice cemetery. Now, this is the year 2023. This is the year, 100 years ago, it was purchased. And it was made over and then ready by the year 2024. So, the synagogue we'll talk about at some point during this discussion. And we'll talk about the rabbi that's in there. Really, what a really cool site. And we'll compare it to the Sons of Zion Cemetery, also based in Holyoke, has a synagogue, but has a cemetery in Chicopee. So there's an analogy there. Now, what about the early burials? Well, if you go out there and look around, you notice that there towards the back, which is south center area, towards the back gate, there's a section where the stones seem a lot older. And that's where the first burials are. Now, there's so many burials around that you make it confused, but this cemetery has a lot of order to it, so that many of the individual stones are buried in order. And you can actually look at the oldest ones back there and go to the next one to the right, next one, and so forth, and you'll find out that they were all buried around the same time, same year. Now, the first burial was not until the 5th of August, 1923, or sooner after, because Reva Livingston Finkelstein died on that day, and she was buried here. Now, why did it take so long? 4 years before there's a first burial. The reason why is because most of the burials of Jewish people in Holyoke were taking place at the Sons of Zion Cemetery, and there were so many plots bought up there that most of the families already had space bought up in that cemetery. So a lot of the early burials at Rodphey Sholom are of single individuals that did not have a family that had bought up family plots in the past. And you can see all these single burials right in a row. And as you look around towards some of the family plots, there's a great gap of years, like until the early 1950s, until you see that you start to have big family plots. So for that reason, even the next burial up to that, 1928, was up until 1929, and then one in 1930. Then it started to get much, much more. So it took a while to develop.
So now what is the history of the Rodphey Sholom Synagogue?
All right. So the Sons of Zion Synagogue was the first one in Holyoke to develop, and it developed in Park Street in Holyoke. It's now under a different name, Clementi Street. That was the first one. But the Rodphey Sholom was basically an offshoot where the congregation wanted to have a stricter ceremony during their celebration of the Mass. And so they split off, and both of them might have started in South Holyoke, but the Sons of Zion moved up to Maple Street, and then the Rodphey Sholom moved up to Northampton Street. And so they were geographically separated finally in the 1950s, whereas they were always very close. And the synagogue, it still exists, and it's still having weekly celebrations. And the congregation level is smaller, but enough that they can still pay for their masses, and thus the cemetery itself is still an active cemetery.
Now, quickly before we continue with the rest of the interview, just to fill our listeners in, if you want to find out more information or sign up for any of his various tours, you can check out his website at holyokecanaltour.org. And there he has both videos of the various stops along each tour and also past and present photos of the historical sites throughout as well. And if you're interested in setting up a private tour, you can email him directly at bobcat4214, B@yahoo.com. And they are perfect for fun and educational outdoor activities for the whole family or for your group parties, especially those special occasions and get-togethers. They are also good just for getting outdoors for the day. So, getting back to our interview, tell us about the burial site of the rabbi.
All right, the rabbi's name was Yehuda Leib Forer, mostly known as Leib Forer, and he was the rabbi for both synagogues, the Rodphey Sholom synagogue and the Sons of Zion synagogue. Incredible fact. So both synagogues hired him for their use. In 1948, he died, and he was buried in the Rodphey Sholom synagogue. Now, he is buried in what's called a mausoleum. That means an above-ground vault. In Chicopee, there's only 2 mausoleums, and this is the average. Most communities in western Massachusetts might have 1 or 2 mausoleums within the city or town. And so he's in there with his wife, and they both have their joint together mausoleum. It's very easy to find. It's the only mausoleum in this Rodphey Sholom. His wife, Minucha, is buried with him. Now, he was born in Belarus. She was born in Lithuania. He was a veteran rabbi in Holyoke for 24 years. And he had lots of help. He was well beloved. So he was a very successful rabbi. Of course, they used to have not only the ceremonies of the Mass every week, they'd have a Jewish school for the youngsters, and he would have help doing that, but he was the one that was in control of it. So he was a great rabbi, and obviously if you have a mausoleum, you're probably well respected and honored.
Now, how does this cemetery compare to the Sons of Zion Cemetery?
Okay, the Sons of Zion Cemetery is from 1897, and they're both in Chicopee. Of course, Sons of Zion, being older, has a lot of very old burials of the Jewish people. But Rodphey Sholom is starting to develop. When you go there, you might think, oh, this is a very modern cemetery. But if you go there and you start looking for the old single burials, you see that definitely 1920s. And if you start looking at some of the family stones, you'll again see some older ones in the family stones. So it's taken a while, but it's getting its own personality. In the year 2024, it has its 100th anniversary, and I plan to have a historical tour around the cemetery to honor that 100th year. Now, if you don't know how to read the Hebrew on there, almost everything is in English. Where compared to the Sons of Zion, some of the stones are only in Hebrew. And so you can see as you get older and older, the gravestones themselves have changed. Another thing I found out about the Sons of Zion, a lot of the stones are closer together, whereas in Rodphey Sholom, there's a little more space given to them. That's because a lot of tradition of old Jewish burials was that every person would have their own stone. But that tradition by the 1950s had changed, and so you got a lot of family stones in both Sons of Zion and Rodphey Sholom. And family stones at least makes it look like the burials are further apart. Not every stone is right on top of each other. Thank you very much.
And thank you, Robert, for educating us on your tours, and we want to thank our listeners for tuning in. You can also tune in to a large selection of our other podcasts and much more at his website, holyokecanaltour.org. And again, you can email him directly for private tours or to inquire about anything else at bobcat4214, B@yahoo.com. And be sure to keep an eye out for his upcoming 2024 season tours. And so today we'll be discussing the Sons of Zion Cemetery. Now, the Sons of Zion Cemetery is in the Fairview neighborhood of Chicopee, Massachusetts. The So it is a Jewish cemetery that was started in 1896 by the congregation Sons of Zion. Now, what does the trolley system of Holyoke have to do with the cemetery?
So the trolley used to leave from the trolley station, the flat section of Holyoke, and it would go over the bridge to South Hadley near the St. Patrick's Church, then up to Fairview, and in the western part or eastern part of Fairview was the Sons of Zion Cemetery. This trolley came right up to the gate. And why? Because the Holyoke Trolley Company owned a special trolley carriage that was designed just for funerals. It had one car all in black with black drapery, and then you would fit up to 80 mourners on it, and they put the casket right in the middle, and they can go to any cemetery, any church in the area, and honor the person in this way. It was an incredible, remember there was no cars around, and people would need a way to go to that cemetery, and this was a great way of getting around.
Now, tell us about the Epstein family.
The Epstein family was a Jewish family based in Holyoke that started up a goods company. They became a furniture company. They were based in a couple of locations on Main Street for many, many, many decades. And they went up to the corner of Dwight and Maple Street in the store there. And they got very rich by doing this. They're one of the main families inside the Sons of Zion Cemetery. And they have a chapel there in front, which was donated by the Epstein family in honor of one of the aunts that married into the family. And the chapel's still there, even though it's about 93 years old now. Thanks.
Now, so who are Mendel Margolis and Lee Forer?
Those two were rabbis at the same time. The official rabbi was Lee Forer, and he was a rabbi for both synagogues in Holyoke. He's not buried in Sons of Zion Cemetery. He's buried in the Rodphey Sholom Cemetery in Chicopee on Pendleton Street. And Mendel Margolis was his helper. He didn't go to religious school to be a real rabbi, but anyone could call themselves a rabbi in the Jewish religion as long as they helped the rabbi. And that he did with an enormous degree. He is buried in the Sons of Zion Cemetery with all of his family. And I was able to obtain from a relative of his a picture of his family, which is incredible.
Now, so what is the design of the cemetery?
This cemetery is a lawn cemetery, and it's very easy to see the road design. In Jewish cemeteries, the gravestones are very close together. So the problem with this cemetery is, sure, it's easy to mow the lawn in front and behind, but it's hard to get the grass in between because the stones are so close together.